and conditional cash transfers to economically vulnerable groups play a big role in smoothing their expenditure and managing other vulnerabilities, including health-related events. Uganda's Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is implementing the Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment scheme under the expanding Social Protection Programme. The program was initiated with the support of development partners, including the UK Department for International Development, now Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and Irish Aid. The Social Assistance for Grants and Empowerment Program, commonly known as SAGE, was successful, and it generated evidence to guide the establishment of wider social protection systems across the country. Financial sector deepening Uganda has worked closely with the ministry and alongside other development sector actors to put robust systems in place for the national rollout. FSD Uganda partnered with Expanding Social Protection Secretariat to support the payouts of the Senior Citizen Grant and develop a use case that has the potential to improve the economic resilience of one of the most vulnerable groups, the elderly.
There has been enough statistical evidence that have shown that cash transfers can help in income smoothing. It can help in building resilience when there's a big shock. Example, COVID. Many people lost their jobs, businesses had serious erosion of revenues, and a small cash transfer for the most vulnerable households is like putting oxygen when you are short of breathing. Once you're able to breathe again, you can then help yourself to survive. So cash transfers are a bigger umbrella. They can be administered in multiple ways. It can be done for a vulnerable target group for a short-term period, like the way it's being done during COVID in multiple countries. You can do them for a couple of months so that households that have lost an income can still continue to survive while they find a replacement or while people find alternative sources of revenue. Or it can be in the form of long-term support for certain vulnerable groups.
Initially, this program was set up to pilot the implementation of the Senior Citizens Grant, which we commonly refer to as SAGE, that is the Social Assistance Grants for Empowerment. This is support which goes to the elderly. But beyond that, it was supposed to generate evidence about the broader social protection to justify the expansion and establishment of social protection systems in this country. You know, in Uganda, we've adopted what we call the life cycle approach to social protection, looking at the risks and shocks that people undergo in that transition from conception, when you are born, when you become a youth, when you are a worker, when you are an older person. So SAGE is attempting to address some of the challenges that are faced by the older persons. Of course, older persons in our context should be any person above the age of 65 years.
Developing payment use cases for improved access and usage of formal financial services for government-to-person social protection programs has opened opportunities to enhance other social protection programs. Support from partners has led to key successes, including efficiencies created in bulk payments, the implementation of national payment guidelines, and the development of distribution and operational models that are viable for financial service providers.
We started with 15 districts as pilot districts, but we are now in 146 districts. Every district in this country is benefiting from the social assistance grant for empowerment of the elderly. And that is some credit that we need to give to government, our partners, all who have contributed to this process.
Postbank Uganda was the first payment service provider contracted by the ministry for the first phase of payouts.
Payments is a unit at Postbank Uganda that looks at social payments in the country. We have quite a number of organizations that we work with to make sure that we transfer funds to beneficiaries who are most are semi-urban, some are in refugee camps, others are in deep down in the villages. After the contracting, we were given a list of beneficiaries, quite a number of beneficiaries, more than 100,000 beneficiaries across 60 districts. These beneficiaries when we started serving them, you could, especially the newer districts, you see a difference when they are receiving stipends right now and when they used not to receive these stipends. I mean, most of them are more healthy. Most of them, they tell you stories like, I've roofed my house. Others telling you stories like, I've bought a goat. My children go to school. I now eat meat. When we make, on the day of payments, for example, it's more or less a market day. That means the impact that these beneficiaries, these funds are creating are not only up to the beneficiaries, even the host communities.
Now, what the other piece that a cash transfer does for low-income households, it increases the aggregate demand in a local economy. People will spend, people who need 25,000 shillings a month or 50,000 shillings a month are truly low-income households. And they will spend in their lower income, in that economy around them, which will enable the businesses that are around in that local economy and increase aggregate demand in a time during COVID where a lot of countries are afraid that they are going into a recession. Cash transfers can help in increasing access and usage of financial services.
In the financial year 2015-2016, when the pilot phase ended successfully, the government recognized the impact of the Senior Citizens Grant to the beneficiaries and endorsed its national rollout. FSD Uganda partnered with the expanding Social Protection Secretariat to enhance the payouts. Technical assistance supports the ministry to adopt a multiple payment service providers approach for the countrywide rollout.
Our role in terms of what we assisted or supported the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development in Uganda is to wholesomely look at one specific area of payments, which we call government to person payments, that is G2P. We provided support to the ministry by doing a market scoping study. This is just an understanding of what products are there in the market that can be applied for the senior citizens so that they are able to get their benefits at the end of the day efficiently as well as effectively. The other area that we also supported the ministry is the development of payment standards, which is basically a guideline to guide the payment service provider that will enable these payments or that will effect these payments to the identified beneficiaries. We assisted them as well in developing a world standard open tender request for proposal documentation, as well as working with them through the entire process.
Under the management information system that we have, we're also developing what we call a single registry, national single registry for social protection. And this will aggregate data from the various social protection programs that we have. In terms of the systems, the payment mechanisms have been set up. And this, we want to give credit to FSDU. This has been a wonderful contribution in terms of guiding. You might want to know that at the moment, our payment mechanism is providing for a payment service provider, and these are commercial banks. Locally here, we're using the Post Bank Uganda and Centenary Bank. But the terms of reference, putting all this together and making sure that deliverables are very clear and how we want it to be done, this was supported by FSDU, and we want to take note of that and thank FSDU for that wonderful contribution.
We supported the Ministry of Gender in figuring out a way of how do you scale these payments from government, so from one to many, from government to multiple people. We were looking at about 300,000 elderly about the age of 80. And how do we do that digitally so that there is more transparency, less leakage, and we are able to ensure that the beneficiaries can access the funds that are being provided to them. This was also very challenging. It is not just about digital payments, making sure that beneficiaries get payments in a manner that is competitive to them, so that in a manner that they have choice. You can decide how you want to receive a payment, whether it's on your mobile money wallet or whether it's the agent closest to you, is important because it gives power to the customer. We try to test different models of how do we make sure we get payments closest to where the beneficiaries are.
We can pride ourselves with the fact that we now have the very world-first payment guidelines, especially for social protection for the elderly, because this is something that has not been done before worldwide. So this guideline will assist the ministry going forward as and when they bring in more payment service providers. It is also and can also be applied to any other program that the ministry is doing. So for example, let's say for persons with disabilities, how can they apply the rules of the operations, let's say for providing payments to the persons with disability. So that's one of the success that we can pride ourselves in. We also have the market scoping report for Uganda, very relevant for the ministry, because now at least the ministry has got hindsight or information relating to what the financial markets are presenting to them or are presenting outside there, and which are the relevant products and services that they can use, be it, let's say, agency banking, for example, or be it using payments using a card, or maybe for the beneficiaries, let's say, to access their payments using an ATM. How many ATMs are outside there in the market, in which localities, and how can they be used? And also, more importantly, even the cost.
Throughout all this time, what has helped us to transition through these stages has been the power of information, scientifically generated information. So as you undertake this, we want to invest in evidence-based programming. So that information is very important. Secondly, we need to devise the most efficient and effective mechanisms of operation to minimize the costs of doing business. And one of the things that I think comes out very key here is digitization. During the COVID period, we had not yet went to set in, we had not yet covered all the districts, but then we had the money to pay some of these people, but we had not registered them. But what helped us was the data which was resident in the National Identification Registration Authority, NIRA.
However, these successes have not been without challenges, including the impact of COVID-19 pandemic that led to a lockdown, adding a layer of complexity to the payments processes. But these challenges are in many ways also a lesson to be taken into consideration for scale.
This is a complex project, especially for the ministry and by extension the government. So our role, like I said, is basically on technical assistance. However, there is a lot of partnerships that the ministry and the government need to draw down from various stakeholders. Of course, we cannot do it alone as FSD Uganda. We are not a payment service provider for that matter, but we have a lot of in-depth knowledge because we work within the financial sector. We work with various actors, that is the banks, the microfinance institutions, SACCOs, cooperatives. We work with the fintechs. So we have a lot of knowledge, we have a lot of experience, and we also have a lot of insights coming from the financial sector, which is where the ministry or the government was drawing from. In terms of countrywide rollout, Uganda is quite rich when it comes to language and culture. So what works perhaps in the urban region in one area may not necessarily work in another region because the language is very different, the social norms are very different, and these are things that the payment service provider, the ministry, and the government at large needs to look at when they are making payments or when they are reaching out to these beneficiaries.
This expansion that is covering the entire country is largely being financed by the government of Uganda from its own resources, and to me that means a lot in terms of sustainability. So in other words, I see a very bright future because we have the political will, and therefore there's full support to enable us to deliver. But above all, it's a program which is being demanded by the people themselves. It was not about the ministry saying, let's expand this program. There was a call from the vulnerable persons, and government in its nature cannot ignore such calls. So for me, I see government, the stakeholders, the beneficiaries, the development partners working together to improve on this.